Neuroscientists have found that it only takes 90 seconds for an emotion to pass through the body. Anything more than that shows that we're looped in the mind.
"83% of Americans identify as not very happy, which can hold you back and negatively affect your relationships and your business. On this podcast, we discuss the proven steps to happiness so you can restore balance and rekindle your joy.
Welcome to another episode of How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. Hope you're having a fantastic day. We have a cool subject today. It's going to be mental wellness and transformation and all things good. So, Michele Capots, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
How are you today?
I am doing well.
Sweet. Yeah, we were just talking about how much rain we're getting here in Northern Virginia, but the sun is going to be shining soon like it always does. There's a saying I love. The sun is always shining. You just have to get through the clouds. So, Michele, you have a pretty phenomenal story of transformation and healing. Can you take us back to the day that you were found on the interstate?
Absolutely. So let me give you a little bit of context of what was going on at that point. So at the time, I was in my early 30s and I felt like my life was just starting to take off. I had overcome a clinical depression several years earlier. I was now working at a national magazine. I had just moved in with my boyfriend. We were talking about marriage. I was checking off the boxes in my head. I felt like everything was just taking off. And then I had a couple of days of not sleeping. And I ended up driving, I ended up wandering the Route 68 interstate. I had been up 3:00 in the morning, couldn't sleep, started driving. I had been at my mother's house and started driving and driving and driving and driving. And eventually I stopped and I started wandering the Route 68 interstate, and my heart was beating a mile a minute, and the only thing I could hear were the cars whizzing by me. I was someone who never left the house without my 5-inch heels, and I was wearing Tasmanian Devil boxer shorts, a t-shirt that was ripped all the way up to my left breast. I was barefoot and my dog was beside me, not on a leash. And in that moment, I decided to do something that I had only seen work in the movies, and I stuck out my thumb.
Wow.
But nobody would stop. And that day, I went down to a place I'd never been before, down to a place of despair, and down to a place of shame. But I also climbed back up. It felt like I was out there for hours, but eventually a fire truck drove by and picked me up and took me to the hospital. And that was the moment that I first started to crawl. And then as I got my confidence back, it became a walk. And what felt like years, but it was only 2, it became a run. And now I'm not ashamed of that story. I stand proud and tall because what that experience taught me is just how resilient I am. And I've learned that even when you're feeling hopeless, it can turn around and be a superpower if there is hope. But the biggest thing I've learned is that there's an I in illness and a we in wellness. And that we, mental well being, became my number one priority. And it created not just a commitment, but a mission in me to want to help other people to find that in their own lives.
Wow. Wow. Lots of questions. Great stuff. So where is Route 68?
It's in West Virginia. And my mother lived in Pennsylvania. So I ended up on an interstate in West Virginia. I don't even know geographically like where it exactly was that I was found.
So Michelle, as you look back, I mean, how many years ago was this? This was several years
This
ago.
this was in 2005.
Okay, so almost 20 years ago, as you've replayed that story, or have you figured out through your healing what actually occurred that day or evening or whenever it was?
So, as I mentioned, that I had overcome a clinical depression, and the not sleeping triggered me into a manic episode. So, I was in the middle of a manic episode and didn't didn't know what was happening. But the sight, if you can imagine the sight of me out there on the side of the road. I mean, I vividly remember like a van going by and kids pointing. My dog was with me. Um, and and nobody would stop. And what's really funny about that moment, it's actually not, but when I was a little girl, I remember there was a place driving over the mountain when we were in I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and there was with my grandmother lived over the mountain, but it wasn't really a mountain. It was more like a hill. And I remember doing that one day. And on the side of the road was a disheveled man with a garbage bag, smoking a cigarette. And as we drove by, my mother told me to lock all the doors. And I remember innocently asking why. And she just said, because we don't pick up hitchhikers. And I thought of that story as I was standing there on the side of the road hitchhiking. That moment replayed in my mind.
Isn't it amazing how you were almost kind of in like a sleepwalking? You were like asleep, right? Asleep at the wheel, but yet your subconscious mind brought you back to a memory. It's fascinating because our subconscious mind never forgets anything. So have you, I don't know, because this is our second time talking. We only spent a couple minutes talking the first time. What is your position on why 20 years ago did you have this clinical depression? What was the cause of it?
So it's really interesting. And I have a very extensive background in mental health. So I went through a clinical depression, and that was brought on at the time, and this was in my late 20s. I could say that I was working around the clock. I stopped eating, I stopped sleeping. But when it comes to depression, in my experience, and I can only speak for myself, I don't think there's one main thing that sets someone off. And what happened is at that time, I was diagnosed with depression, but it was actually bipolar depression, which we weren't aware of. So this time, 3, 4 years later, whatever it was, I experienced mania, but never knew I had a bipolar diagnosis. So I think what's so interesting is since that time and in those 20 years, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, I do believe I haven't had another episode like that. And I attribute a lot of that to lifestyle changes. And when it comes to, and there's a lot of schools of thought, and I have, um, and this is for another conversation, but I have a lot of interest and experience in, not experience, but interest in our nervous system holds on to all of that and carries with us.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. So, how do you differentiate between mental health and mental wellness, and why is that important for people to understand the differences?
I think there's a huge difference between mental health and mental wellness, and they often get lumped together. But in my experience, in my lived experience, mental health involves the diagnosis. It involves a diagnosis. It involves medication. It involves therapy. It involves doctors. But mental wellness, on the other hand, is a journey. It's the lifelong process that helps us be resilient and grow. I think that when it comes to mental wellness, it involves the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. And you don't need to have a mental health challenge to strive for mental wellness. For some, it may look like eating right or getting enough sleep, meditation. And it's all of those things, but it's more than that for me. It's a complete alignment of the body and mind and an awareness of our thoughts. I don't believe that mental wellness is something to be achieved. I like to think of it more as a state of being.
Love it. Love it. So, what are you currently doing now to help people in this?
So I do a lot of things. Again, I don't focus on mental health. So my focus is on mental wellness. And some of the things that I do in my coaching practice is I have 3 and 6 months programs, and we really focus on that awareness. So we think something like 60,000 thoughts a day, and 75% of those are said to be negative and 95% repetitive. So it's so easy to latch on to a thought that we think without even realizing it. We can just reinforce that thought in our minds. But when it comes to the body knows how to process a thought if we're not going over it over and over again. Neuroscientists have found that it only takes 90 seconds for an emotion to pass through the body. Anything more than that shows that we're looped in the mind. So the first step is I work with people on their awareness and then accepting and really delving into where those thoughts began. And a lot of that is maybe with somatic work, with just being body focused, and then action, but you're taking action every step of the way. But this time it's aligned action. I work with clients on everything from self-confidence to finding a new job. But the basis is going after those goals from the inside out. So it's an inside out approach to goal setting.
Yeah. So the awareness where you become aware of when those thoughts began. Do you see that most of those thoughts in your clients began like decades ago?
Yes. Yes, I'm thinking of one client in particular, and she was who came to my mind earlier, that came to me to work on confidence. She was having struggles at her job. She felt like she was being passed over for assignments and that work was going to what she thought her boss thought were her more capable colleagues, and she knew they were making more money than she did. So she came to me originally to increase her confidence, to have the ability to ask for a raise or to get that confidence to search for a new job. And in some of our work together, we did a lot of things. But one of those beliefs that she came about, or memories, was a time when she was little and doing homework with her father, and she was ridiculed for not knowing the right answer. And that was a tape that was still playing today when it came to going after what she wanted. So, one of the many things that we did was presence that thought and allow it to be there, but then also come up with an action plan of what's something to do if that thought came back, so she didn't revert into a past pattern of behavior. And what she not only ended up asking for that raise, but she doubled her salary.
Whoa.
So it's going after your goals from the inside out.
Yeah, I love it. External things can't provide happiness, and nor can they rob our joy or happiness unless we let them, right?
Mhm.
For 47 years of my life, I chased things outside of myself, money and fame and success and cars and boats, thinking, oh, when I get to this point, I'm going to be happy. And it doesn't quite work that well. So I want to ask you about what people can do if they're struggling. But first, I want to share with the listeners that if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I wonder if I have some of these thoughts from decades ago that are negatively impacting my life, whether it's through addiction or depression or anxiety or just, you shutting down with your spouse. You can find out by taking a 3-minute self love quiz at unlocklimitlessyou.com/quiz. This 3 minutes may get you the awareness that Michelle's talking about that can start you on a journey that can forever change your life in ways that you can't imagine. So go ahead and take that quiz at unlocklimitlessyou.com/quiz. So, Michelle, if someone is listening to this and they're suffering or they're struggling, what steps, like what can they start to do today, tomorrow, to start ending or mitigating the suffering that they're feeling?
There's a couple things. And if you're feeling stuck and unable to move forward, and mental health is only one of many things that can keep you stuck in the same place, but my suggestion would be the same no matter what it is. And it can be the hardest thing to do, and that's to practice self compassion. So we have the judgments that we place on ourselves are what can be most damning. And like you just said, then we search outside of ourselves. We look for something outside to make us feel better, whether it's alcohol, shopping, anything. We'll go to anything to not have to look at ourselves. But I encourage someone, and again, If you're experiencing trauma or you have a lot of trauma, you may want to work with a professional in order to do this. But if not, I would suggest presencing that and allowing that feeling to be there and giving yourself grace in the moment. So placing a hand on your heart and saying, this is hard. Acknowledging that what you are going through is difficult, but going as far as to say out loud, it's okay. I am okay. I'm going to be okay. And just showing yourself that small level of self-compassion rather than swimming in the despair, it opens the aperture to begin to find a little bit of relief. And again, there's tools like journaling is a big one. I've kept a journal since I was a sophomore in high school. I have tons. Processing my emotions through writing is something that I love to do. So journaling, affirmations, meditation, but nothing brings me the quickest and most profound relief as being compassionate with myself. But there's something you can do every single day when one of these thoughts come up. And that's a strategy called catch it, check it, change it. So the first is to catch that thought, what we talked about earlier. Be aware, catch your thought when you think it. So be aware of your thought and then ask yourself, check it against reality. Ask yourself, can I know without a shadow of a doubt that what I am believing right now in this moment is indeed true? And just allow yourself yes or no. Not a big answer, just yes or no. And 9 times out of 10, that answer is no, which makes it easier to let that thought go. And then finally change it. In that moment, replace it with a more uplifting thought or an affirmation or something that is more uplifting for you. So getting in the habit when those thoughts arise of catching it, checking it, and changing it.
I agree with so much of what you just said. The compassion part is so big. I used to get so nervous when I was playing tournament golf, even up until like 4 or 5 years ago. And so I'd have this anxiety and I would be like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're at a country club, you know where your next meal is coming from. You don't have bombs dropping on your head like other people in the world, and you're freaking nervous. Like, what's wrong with you? And it would just make it worse. And now that I've unearthed why I had those, because I had the fear around judgment because I didn't feel enough, they come back, but they come back like, 2% or 5% or 10% for seconds at a time. But instead of beating myself up, I just say, it's okay, you're feeling anxious. It's all right. And oh my gosh, is it so much better, right? So the beating yourself up in the negative self-talk, that's another huge one, right? Your body and your mind doesn't know the difference between you saying it and a complete stranger. So what happens? Your mind, your brain releases cortisol. It's an inflammatory. What's the basis of probably 75 to 90% of all disease and illness in the world? Inflammation. So if you're talking negatively yourself, please stop. And as you said, I think the second stage was, is it true? Any negative thing you say about yourself, the basis of it's untrue. I promise you, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't deserve this. It's all untrue. We can't suffer when we live in the truth. So I love that technique. Compassion, ask yourself if it's true. I teach very similar things. It's great.
And I think that, and let me say that, you know, back to mental health for a moment, and I'll speak for myself when I've been in that state where you are beating yourself up or you're judging yourself for something you've done. That's where, for me in my life, the anxiety used to come in. And my anxiety would manifest, my hands would start to tremble. Anytime I got really anxious, my hands would start to tremble. So, and what you focus on persists. So the more I thought that thought, the more my hands would tremble. Then I'm thinking, oh my God, my hands are trembling. Can anyone tell my hands are trembling? And then I'm completely coming undone in this moment when if I just stopped and took a breath and showed myself some compassion and reassured myself, it's okay. You're going to be okay. That begins the process of changing that whole scenario.
Yeah, it's okay. Another word to say it's okay is I'm safe, right? All of these fears and negative emotions, no matter what they are, at the basis of them, it's our fear that we don't have safety. Not, you're not consciously thinking, oh my gosh, someone's going to rob me or beat me or kill me. No, 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 no. It's this subconscious brain that's been evolving for 6 million years. The only reason is for us, our subconscious minds to keep us alive. So we've got that playing in the background constantly. Michele, if people want to find out more about you or work with you, how can they best reach you?
So you can contact me on my website, which is michelecapots.com. And I'm a 1L Michele. Everybody always tries to put 2 L's in there. I'm a 1L Michele. And I'm also very active on Instagram at michelecapots.com, all spelled out one word, DOTCOM, michelecapots.com, spelled out one word. So those would be the 2 biggest places you can find me.
Thank you so much for sharing your amazing story and your resilience and all the nuggets that you shared with our audience today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. It's been great to talk to you.
So that concludes another episode of How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. If you've listened before, you know that I'm on a mission to help 1 million people overcome these self-limiting beliefs that are holding them back from financial abundance and personal abundance. And I certainly can't do that alone. So I need your help. If you like this show, please rate it, review it, share it. Anything you can do to get the word out would be greatly appreciated. Until next time, love heals all.
Hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more life-changing content. And if you're struggling, you don't have to. Go to bradchandler.com/contact. There, you can join the Facebook community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and you'll see a button to schedule your freedom and happiness call. See you on the next episode.